we can't go in there. Never mind, Chipsa's better. Critical one, critical one, critical one.
The complete Bronze to Grandmaster Doomfist guide, featuring Chipsa. This guide is going to be structured into understanding the general playstyle of Doomfist, understanding how his cooldowns complement and enable this playstyle, tank matchups, and then a quick review of a Platinum Doomfist, followed by Chipsa reviewing his own gameplay. No matter whether you're Bronze or a Grandmaster Doomfist, I promise that this guide will help level up your play. Let's get into it. Yo, what's up?
Yo, dude.
What would you describe as like Doomfist's main playstyle? Like why pick Doomfist? What is he good at? How would you describe that?
I would say mostly he's like a disruptor, who basically his job is to go in, similar to sort of a Winston in terms of you're absorbing pressure, but you're not as good as absorbing pressure as Winston. But what you have is that once you get your empowered punch, you become an incredibly lethal target. Like if you can stun a squishy into a wall, or even multiple squishies into a wall, it's quite common that you can get kills by yourself. You can easily like wipe team fights with a big empowered punch. So it's about striking the balance between being disruptive and then also playing like sort of like a pseudo assassin, how you'd play DPS Doom, and trying to get these big pins on squishies and groups of squishies against walls for kills.
So is it good to kind of describe Doom as like a dive tank like a Winston or Diva, but maybe a little more fragile, but also more dangerous when he gets his thing rolling?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think he's not as tanky as either of those two. It's much more likely that he solo kills you than a Winston will. You have to be very careful with Doomfist. If you make mistakes and you put yourself in the wrong position, you're going to die very fast.
So you talk a lot about how the assassin and the disruptor playstyle, and I think the assassin playstyle is pretty intuitive. You're going to find a squishy target like a Widowmaker or Zenyatta and try and remove that hero from the battlefield. But what if they're playing a composition that you're seeing a lot of nowadays with these Kirikos and these Lucios and Tracers, and there isn't a target that feels like an easy squishy to assassinate? So what do you do in circumstances like that? How does Doomfist disrupt without a threat of assassination, I guess?
I think to a degree you always have a threat of assassination, but if not, then it's just about, I think the less damage they have, and generally you have comps like the Kiriko, Lucio, and Tracer or whatever, they tend not to be ones that like sort of insta-kill you, right? They're sort of dancing around the fight. And if they're doing that, I think generally try not to use your block as much and just try to be as aggressive as possible with your cooldowns. But mostly I think it's just about trying to keep your passive working all the time, trying to hit as many people with your slam and disrupt as much as possible, rather than just sort of trying to farm an empowered punch and then kill a squishy.
So against compositions that don't have a lot of squishies that you can easily assassinate, they trade that out for not having a lot of damage that can kill you easily.
Yes, exactly. It's generally you don't have a comp that does both those things. You know, you either have a comp like a Zenyatta and like, you know, Hanzo, Sojourn, something like that, something that does a lot of damage from range. And if you play against comps like that, you tend to notice that your empowered punch gets farmed very easily, which means you can end up assassinating people more. Whereas the comps of the Tracers and etc. Tend not to get your empowered punch farmed as much, which means you have to sort of not rely on that as much.
We've talked a lot about playstyle, and I think you've given a lot of great insight about what we should be looking for when you're playing Doomfist in a lot of circumstances. But then obviously the tricky part is actually doing that. And sometimes when you look at his cooldowns, the slam, the punch, the charge punch, it's not super intuitive how you cycle those things. Do you engage with slam? Do you engage with punch? When do you charge punch? Do you do it before? Do you do it after? Do you mind kind of going down each cooldown and just quickly breaking down how that cooldown might be utilized in different playstyles?
I would say generally you have two ways to engage. I'd say, you know, you're going into a fight with no empowered punch. Generally you're either slamming in and then trying to punch back to somewhat safety and use your power block. Or you can go in, if you're playing more aggressive, you can slam in and then punch in as well and then use your power block. But that relies pretty heavily on making sure that you will actually get empowered, because then it will obviously then it resets the cooldown of your rocket punch, and then you can snowball off that. I would say the power block usage is probably the one that's the most varied. I think there's times where you almost never use it. There's games where you play against like Tracer and Lucio, etc. Comps like that where you're generally only using it to stay alive, rather than to farm an empowered punch. And there's times against comps that have more heavy spam, you know, against comps like that, you're wanting to be using your power block aggressively to get charged rather than defensively to stay alive. When you have the empowered punch, the ideal combo, if you can, is to engage with your empowered punch. So you get your empowered punch, then you wait for your cooldowns, you engage with your empowered punch, and then you follow it up with a slam. That's sort of the dream, especially if you're playing aggressive. That's the ideal situation, because then, let's say you hit 2 people, you knock them into a wall, that does, you know, about 110 damage-ish, and then you follow it up with a slam, and then you've chunked their squishies for the majority of their HP, and they're still stunned against the wall. So if you have any follow-up from your team, they're going to die like that. So that's the dream situation. So it's just about knowing what situations you need to use it and what not to. The most important mechanic you got to understand is that you don't want to use your block when the opponent Doomfist has his rocket punch if you're standing next to each other, because you're just going to cancel it immediately. But mostly it's a matchup of sort of you're ignoring each other, I would say. I think chasing the enemy Doomfist around the map is not really the way to do it, and you're just sort of trying to do what he does onto his backline. D.Va's a weird one. Again, I think D.Va, you can farm your ult pretty fast off of D.Va, you know, punch her around. If she commits too hard, one thing you can try and do, it's quite difficult, is to try and do a small punch on her the second she initiates her fly, and it'll cancel it and you can kill her. But it's a similar sort of matchup to Doomfist in the way that you sort of just ignore her. Winston is similar to the previous two, but I think you can definitely play more aggressive on the Winston, because I think he's much more of a killable target. Like, you can definitely kill a Winston as a Doomfist if you chase him around the map. It really depends on how the Winston's playing. If he's playing very safe and conservative, then it's probably not worth going on him. But if he's playing very aggressive, you can sort of knock him out of his bubble and stuff like that. And don't be afraid to also, when he's about to jump on you, you can use your power block as he's about to land, and it'll sort of almost fully charge your power block. Definitely, like, if you have an empower punch as well and you see him in your backline, don't be afraid to just use it on the Winston, because of the way that the empowered rocket punch works, it has AoE. It's also, if there's someone near him, like a Genji or a Tracer, there's a good chance it hits them as well, and then you're getting really, really good value. I haven't really played Junkerqueen Matchup much because she's not very popular and ranked, but I'm pretty sure that the Junkerqueen can't really do much into you. You can just sort of run at her. She plays very similar to the way you play against Ryan and Sigma, in terms of the enemy team is wanting to group around the Junkerqueen. So it's about getting empowered punches and then punching the Junkerqueen with almost all of your empowered punches, because the AoE is going to hit everyone around. Now, since the changes, like the nerf to the empowered punch, the AoE is less, so it's less viable, that strategy. But you can sort of completely deny Junkerqueen just by constantly knocking her away, and then because she wants to get in your face, and it's very easy for you to deny her to do that. Orisa's a really, I don't know, it's a really frustrating matchup, I find, because almost all the Orisas I play against, they sort of just run around and chase you around the map. And you can't really ever kill an Orisa if she plays her cooldowns correctly. So it's basically just about baiting her fortify and then running away. When she's doing the little javelin spin, you can cancel that with your rocket punch. But mostly she, from my experience, she just runs around and spears you. So I just try to ignore her as much as I can, and only really go on her when she's really out of position. Generally, I would just try to ignore her as much as you can. So Reinhardt, I think, is probably Doomfist's best matchup. I think that in my experience, it's a very, very easy matchup, because the way that the enemy team plays around a Reinhardt sort of plays right into your hand. You know, there's a bunch of people grouping around the Reinhardt. So generally, you want to be farming empowered punches, which is quite easy against the Ryan, because when he swings you, like one of the swings is going to do basically almost fully charges your block, and same with the fire strike. And then you just want to look to try and the key with the Reinhardt matchup is you have to bait his charge. So if you hold your empowered punch and then you cancel it last second, most of the time, especially against the lower tier Reinhardts, they're just going to charge immediately to try and meet your punch. And then they've charged, they're out of position, then your cooldown's up in 3 seconds, and then boom, you can go in straight after that. So it's about baiting the charge, because if you meet head-to-head with the Ryan, it's pretty much a 50-50 what happens. It depends where the team situation is, and you don't really want to get yourself into that position. Roadhog is probably the hardest matchup, I'd say. Obviously, he sort of counters your entire kit because his hook goes through your power block. But it depends on how aggressive he plays. Either you just ignore him and you go for backline, or if he plays very aggressive, you can sort of... it's a very, very hard matchup, but your Rocket Punch can cancel both his hook and his take a breather. So oftentimes your teammate will get hooked in, and then you can punch just before the hog's about to shoot, and it'll save them. Also, if you punch just as he's winding up his hook, it will also cancel that. But the main one is when he's like, if you're sort of face to face with a Roadhog and he's trying to retreat, he's not going to use his take a breather until you've used your Rocket Punch. So you just sort of keep shooting him until he uses it. Then the second he uses it, you just immediately cancel it, and then it's quite easy to kill. But besides that, it's a very hard matchup that you've just got to try and kite around him and not get hooked as much as possible. So Sigma, I find is also a pretty easy matchup for Doomfist. I play it sort of similar to Reinhardt in a way that I think a lot of teams will play around the Sigma. You're just about farming and power punches, which Sigma is probably one of the heroes that gives it the easiest. You know, like his left click, if he hits both, will give you a fully charged punch. And since the changes, the rock will almost give you a fully charged punch. If you take any damage, he rocks you. Even though it stuns you, you will get the empowered punch if it does enough damage to take you over the threshold. So to me, it's just about farming empowered punches and then just punching the Sigma. And most of the time, his teammates play around the Sigma, in my experience. And then you can get big AoE punches and then play aggressive. But you don't really need to be that worried about Sigma because he doesn't really do much to you. And he's very, very easy to get empowered punches off. Wrecking Ball is also a matchup I haven't played that much. But it's sort of similar to how you'd play it in the original Overwatch in terms of like the main form of ways that you can deal with him is when he's like slamming. If you get the timing right, as he's coming down, you can time your punch so it hits him just before he hits the ground, and it will cancel his slam. Like he'll come to the ground, but he won't hit like everyone around him, right? So that's a pretty good way to play around it. Again, it's sort of similar to the other dive tanks though, and your job isn't really to focus him, it's to focus the rest of his team. But another thing you can do as well, that's one of the best parts about it, is that when he uses his ult, the minefield, if you do a slam on the mines, it does enough damage to kill the mines outright. So you can end up clearing like 80% of the mines with one of your basic abilities, which is really, really, really good. And also another tip as well, if you see a mine on the floor and you have power block, you can just walk into the mine whilst facing it with power block, and it will charge your power block as well, which is really, really useful. So Zarya is another one of the harder matchups. Not so much into the patch, because I don't think Zarya is that good post-patch, but she's going to try and deny your all-ins by bubbling a target that you go on. So it is tough, but a lot of it, again, is sort of similar to what you do against Ryan in terms of you try to bait the bubbles out with your rocket punch. Like, you know, you're charging a rocket punch, and then you cancel it, try to bait bubbles. But getting empowered punches, it's similar in the way you play against Ryan and Sigma. In that way, you try to get an empowered punch and you try to punch the Zarya and anyone that's around the Zarya, because they tend to group around her. It's just a lot harder because she doesn't charge your punch the same way, and she has a lot better ways to mitigate your combos because of the way the bubbles work.
And here we come to, in my opinion, the absolute most valuable part of the guide. Chipsa reviewing a Platinum Doomfist, talking about applying many of the same concepts that we've gone over earlier in the video, followed by Chipsa reviewing his own gameplay, talking about many of the things that are going through his brain when he's playing Doomfist.
So always the first thing you want to do with a Doomfist in a game is you want to sort of understand and read what the enemy comp is, right? Like the first life is always just like scouting, right? Finding what they play, and then you can determine your playstyle. You just have to be very careful and you have to be super respectful of the hog and try not to just sort of run at him, try to play like around him, you know, and slam the backline.
A little bit like the assassination playstyle versus this composition rather than disrupting. Yes.
I would say against this comp, it's relatively easy to get your empowered punch because heroes like Widowmaker and Soldier can feed you quite easily. Like Widowmaker hits a body shot, you get it automatically. But it's generally about don't play aggressive until the hog is committed using his hook. That's the best way to play. And then another tip as well is that when you're playing Doomfist, generally you either want to be in front of the entire enemy team or behind the entire enemy team. You don't want to be in the middle. That's the worst place you can be because your block is only frontal. So you need to be super careful. So either you're good diving behind the entire enemy team and then blocking, or you're diving in then running away and blocking, if that makes sense. He needs to make sure when he uses his power block that he gets it. If he doesn't get the empower punch, you're sort of just doing nothing. Because the value that he gets here, because if you go out to like the third person view, you can see that the enemy team is very, very grouped, right? They're all playing close to the Roadhog. So And because the way that the AoE on the punch works, if there's a soldier next to a Roadhog, you don't need to hit the soldier with your punch to actually stun him, right? You can hit the hog, who's a much easier target to hit, and then it will also knock the soldier back. But the key here is that if you're going to play like this, and because you're basically sort of playing passive and baiting, you have to get your empowered punch, or else you're sort of useless.
How do you get empowered punch? You just kind of react to damage, or?
Yeah, it's similar how you'd play a Zarya, right? In terms of you just have to sort of react to when they would use it, or like when you have to put yourself in the mind of your opponent, right? Like I'm this soldier. When am I going to use my Helix rocket? When am I going to use my? When is the Widowmaker going to shoot me? And that just comes with practice. That's nothing that really is teachable, as much as it just comes down to experience. There's something here as well, when you get hooked by a hog, the first thing you want to do pretty much is immediately buffer your rocket punch. If you can buffer your rocket punch, he's going to get one shot off on you, but you knock him back and put him outside of his effective range, even by a little bit, will save you a lot.
So in other words, when I'm in the act or the animation of being hooked right here, I should already be channeling my holding on my right click button.
You should be buffering your right click, and you just want to release it as fast as humanly possible. Knock him back even just an inch. It gives you a little bit of shields, but it really it gives you the space. Team uses hook again there. Again, I would be trying to farm an empowered punch here. I think you're not using your power block aggressively enough for sure, and you're just wasting it there.
So how would you do that here? How would you do that here? Just peek with your power block here to try and catch a Helix or something?
So once the hog's used his hook, you're safe to use. There's nothing that can interrupt your power block, right? So it's a technique you can do is you can like channel your rocket punch as if you're going in, and then use your power block to cancel it, and then they will shoot you. That can be quite useful. But in general here, I would say that once the hog's used his hook, I would just slam into the enemy team, then use my rocket punch to get away, and then hold your power block. The only way you're going to die, really, is if the hog ults you, which could happen, but is unlikely that if you play it fast enough, that's going to happen. But here, the key is that by not having empowered punch versus this comp, you don't really do anything. You need empowered punch to really kill the soldier and the Moira and the Widowmaker, which is the main source of value you get. And since their hog's using his hooks so liberally, he's not saving them, means you can definitely be fishing for them. So that's the main thing I would say here.
Got it.
See, right there you wasted it. And here's a critical mistake, right? So you see the way using slam into rocket punch here. Slam didn't hit, you're cancelling it into the rocket punch, right? You're committing all your cooldowns here. You have no power block. So you don't have a defensibility, you don't have your ultimate, and then you're committing your slam and your rocket punch into what's really a very low percentage chance of getting any value here, because you don't even have an empowered punch. So you're just gambling here, and you should be dead or getting no value for like 9 times out of 10 here.
So what would you recommend here?
It's better to play it slower and like slam I would probably slam where he is right now and then just wait, rather than trying to make like a play. Like I guess he's trying to stop the Moira ult, but you can do that without committing. Like the thing is, if he hits the slam here, he gains 120 health, right? Because the slam gives 40, an ability gives 40 shields per enemy hit. So you're wasting 120 health here, which is quite a lot in the grand scheme of things. Just generally using all your cooldowns at the same time, if you don't have your ult, is just suicide. Because all it takes is them to turn on you, and you have 3 seconds where you don't have your rocket punch, and you have 7 seconds where you don't have your slam or your power block, which means you're just super vulnerable to death. Alright, so in the downtime between fights as well, your main priority is besides getting stagger kills, is trying to get your empowered punch. If you can get your empowered punch before the team fight even begins, that's the dream. And just don't be afraid to just use it and just sort of get lucky, because you're going to have it up when the team fight starts anyway.
So maybe like peeking with it here.
Yeah, right. Because right here, you're sort of in a spot where if while he's channeling this, you'll see in the next second, both the Cassidy and the soldier will look at him and shoot him almost certainly. And that way, if he cancels it into a block right now, he'll almost certainly get his empowered punch.
Hey,
which is what he did.
And look at that.
He got it. So he's learning. And wait for the hog hooks down. Now you can go aggressive here, because you have your teams using ults and cooldowns. Now it's time you go aggressive.
And even though he's didn't get any kills directly, he's causing 4 members of the enemy team to turn around, so they easily kill off the Roadhog.
Yes, yes. Now he probably overcommitted a little bit there at the end, but like at this point, like just before here, like he's pretty much done his job, right? Like you were in a rough spot. They were snowballing pretty hard, and you've managed to stem the tide. All you kind of needed to do here was just not die.
Right.
Which you got a little bit greedy, you know, it happens. I don't think you really did that much wrong. Sometimes they just sort of burst you down.
I think that's where we talk about as well, like going in aggressively mobile. If you go in this deep here, what can your team shoot at the same time, right?
Yes.
I don't see a whole lot here.
The only thing is the Cassidy on point, but it kind of doesn't matter if you go in. He's really is going to get pressured regardless the second he gets spotted. So it's just the risk reward here is just not worth it. You're not getting any value here. You're never killing anyone here, really, unless they're, you know, sleeping. And the chance of you dying is pretty high. And it's not like you're farming your ult because you already have your ult, right? You're not like you're farming a block because there's just no angle really to farm a block here. You see, the Kiriko also TPs in to save the Doomfist and almost dies as well. In fact, she does die. And that's pretty much your fault because your Kiriko went in to try and save you. And then this goes from a fight really that you should win because the Cassidy should be a free kill into one you maybe lose because you got your Kiriko killed.
So if you had a couple of like the basic playstyle tips for somebody who's new to Doomfist, or even somebody who's got time in Doomfist but hasn't quite still wants to break into like the good tiers of Doomfist, what would you say after watching this kind of footage?
I think he made a lot of good decisions, and like a lot of his mechanics felt like fine, you know, a lot of his combos. I just think that what he didn't do right was he didn't utilize the win conditions of Doomfist enough, and I think that he tried to force plays too much. And he also using your cooldowns like combined, like using like, you know, slam into punch or punch into slam is really risky. Unless you have your ultimate, there's a very good chance you die, and it's ended up basically costing you 2 team fights, you know. So like I said, always first life is always just sort of scouting, getting as close as you can. This is pretty a little bit greedy because they have a hog, but I'm just sort of scouting for information here. Sussing out their comp, and against this comp, so the win condition against this comp is getting empowered punches and then getting big massive punches off it. So I go aggressive here. No, they have Sigma, Cassidy, Sojourn, but mostly the Sigma and the Cassidy are the ones that are going to be feeding you the most. And as you can see, as I was saying earlier about the Sigma, you see how they're all 4 of them are grouped together here? Very, very easy to get charged, and then you could just go super aggressive. And I know my Cassidy's next to me. So he has a good angle to follow up on me if need be. So I have a very, very, very lucrative angle here. I have my slam still and my punch. So I'm just looking to farm my punches and then punch the Sigma and anyone around and try and get kills. And here again, get the charge, wait for your cooldowns, wait for your team. And then,
so right there's a great example of like you messed up, but you don't die for it, right? You're like, oh, I messed up. Okay, so that's okay. I can do it again. I'm not gonna die just because I made one mistake. Well,
that's because you're waiting for your slam cooldown before you go in with your empowered punch. If I didn't have my slam there, I'm dead. Like every time I'm dead. But because I have my slam, that's just like, okay, well, I've missed the punch. What am I gonna do now? I'm just gonna slam. I'm not going to slam back to my team because it's too risky. I'm just going to slam to like a high ground where I can't really get chased. Like it's only the Moira chasing me and she can't kill me. So then get my empowered punch, but lucky here to get this. Exactly the same play, looking for punches here.
And this time you kept going in deep, but you maybe went in deeper here because as you punch, as you slam, you have your block again to buy you time for your punch.
Yes. So here, again, it's pre-fight, so it's just about trying to farm. And right there, you see what I did? So if you see what I did right there, that's another technique you'll just learn. The Moira Orb will give you charge. So I knew that I had about 70% charge, and the Moira Orb came. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to track the Moira Orb with my block, because I knew it would be enough. And even though I'm going to get shot in the back and take damage, don't care. I'm not going to die from it. And then I have my Empowered Punch. This is the ideal situation to be in. I'm in a prime position to carry this fight, because I have Empowered Punch, all my cooldowns, and my ult. Here, just trying to survive.
And again, if you mess up, you always have that escape route. It always feels like you got a cooldown in your pocket to get out if things start to go south.
That's definitely the main difference, I think, between the good and the bad Doomfist, is that like the good Doomfist will always have a cooldown to get out. Whether it's punch, whether it's slam, whether it's block, whether it's ult, they'll always have something to get themselves out of a situation where you make mistakes. Like you see, I made a lot of mistakes here. I missed a lot of punches that I should have hit, but I haven't really been punished for it because my cooldown usage is in a way that I'm not like, you know, committing all my cooldowns with no chance of survival, right? Yes, so the Orisa swap, this makes it a little bit harder, but most Orisas will actually shoot your... Most Orisas will throw their spear at your block because it cancels the block, but what they don't realize, or a lot of them don't realize, is that it still gives you the charge. Like if you're halfway on your block, the spear deals, I don't know how much damage it deals, but like 50 damage-ish. It will give you the... It will finish the remainder before it hits the stun. So it's still relatively easy to do that, but...
So it stuns you, but it still feeds you the charge before it stuns
exactly,
you.
yeah. So you come out the stun with the empowered punch. So here, again, a lot of it's just like the main cooldown you have to be worried of is the fortify. You can't really do anything about the fortify. The javelin spin doesn't really do anything to you. But the way their comp is they're still going to play the same way. They have to play grouped. It's the only real way they can win. So this is just perfect position to just farm an empowered punch, which I've got pre-fight. And then it's just about waiting, looking for the opportunity, and then punishing them off it.
Now, what if they don't play group? What if they start to take flanks and off angles? Is that where Doom shines? Like where you just hunt them off one by one, or how would you respond to that?
If they play this comp and split, then you have tons of options because the Cassidy's going to be by himself, and Cassidy's a very reasonably easy kill for Doomfist by himself. The Sojourn is also killable as Doomfist, and if they're playing split in that way, you can just sort of feast on the squishies by themselves. Like you said, just pressure them off or kill them. I'm just getting in the thick of it because I know we're up players and I have my ult. I don't really have to be worried about dying here. So I'm just creating pressure. Like I'm not getting any kills, but you see, like their Sojourn was completely out of the fight there. She just did nothing but just get, you know, sort of ragdolled by me the whole time.
So that's where you're creating space. You don't even get a kills, but you're causing so much disruption, so much chaos that it's really hard for them to do what they want to do.
Exactly. Again, somehow they're almost turning the fight. That's a nice little flick. There's a little bit of my hacking coming in.
If you were talking to, I guess, to the higher tier Doomfist at this point, maybe the Diamonds, the Masters, even the Grandmasters, what's on the short checklist for things that they need to be looking at?
Well, I think a lot of it is obviously, it's going to sound obvious, but getting better with your mechanics and trying to push your limits. Like I think if you're trying to improve, I think that pushing your limits is generally a better way to do. Like play very aggressive and sort of learn when is too much. Like test your limits. You know, play more aggressive than you would to try and understand what situations you can survive and what situations not. Like, you know, punishing like a Cassidy out of position, make sure being able to get that solo kill consistently is a really important thing. And besides that, obviously, like there's lots of small tips and lots of things you have to understand that you can use your power block to get charge. And it's just about understanding your win condition. Really, that's the key. I think is looking at where the enemy comp. What do they do that I can abuse? Like, are they playing a comp like this, where like especially with the Sigma, where they're grouped and I'm just looking for empowered punches all the time, or am I just looking to disrupt their backline?
Big thank you to Chipsa for taking his time out to help out with this guide. Make sure to follow him at twitch.tv/Chipsa and check out his other socials linked in the description. Let me know if you have any questions, and that's it.